Welcome to the Customer Smarts podcast, where you'll discover smarter ways to deliver customer experiences. I'm your host, Justin Stafford. This episode is a special one. I was invited by Qualtrics to record an episode of the Customer Smarts podcast at their X4 Summit in Sydney. Just in case you don't know Qualtrics, they're one of the leading experience management platforms specializing in customer experience and employee experience. They are particularly well known in the strategy and insight space, helping massive organizations run their research and voice of customer programs. They work with Coke, Samsung, Toyota, and Spotify, and a whole bunch of other brands. I've used Qualtrics over the years and found it a really great tool to collect and share insights throughout your organization, which is really essential in driving a successful CX program. Now, when you look inside many large organizations, it still takes them an incredibly long time to capture data, extract insights, and then turn those into improvements for the business. So the burning question I wanted to answer is, how are organizations closing the gap from insights to impact? To get perspective on this, I had the privilege of interviewing some really amazing guests, including Bruce Temkin, the godfather of CX and experience management. He pioneered the whole industry. Brad Anderson, president at Qualtrics. Stephen Issa, former chief digital officer at Australian Digital Health Agency. Ashley Taylor from Flight Centre. Melanie Disser, a CX advisor at Ecosystem. And Steve Bennett to provide an employee experience perspective from Qualtrics. Some of the new Gen AI features built into the platform are really going to be game-changing, like conversational feedback in surveys, where the survey questions adapt based on how the person responds to get much deeper insights. On the EX side, an AI feature that acts as a manager coach to help managers better understand staff and make better decisions. We all know a lot of managers who could do with that. This episode is a compilation of 6 great conversations. It's packed full of amazing insights. I hope you enjoy. I have Bruce Temkin with me, also known as the godfather of CX. Thanks for joining me, Bruce.
Thanks for having me.
I'd like to start by getting your thoughts on customer-centric transformation a bit more broadly. Many organizations now have a customer-centric strategy, a voice of customer program, a CX team, a customer innovation team, but it's still struggling to fully transition away from that product-centric culture and operating in silos. What do you see that they're missing?
Well, I think to begin with, change is hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
All sorts of change, right? One of the things that's really interesting is if you ask an organization, does the organization need to change? People will say yes. You ask them if they need to change, they say no. So it's always someone else. So I think it's not an issue that's unique to the customer experience space.
Yeah.
It's that all organizations are challenged with change. And I think the CX movement hasn't done enough to focus on compelling change as they've done on trying just to share data.
Yep. Yeah, okay. And what are some of the key things to help accelerate that change, particularly, I guess, in the CX space?
Yeah, I think when it comes to CX, one of the things I always think about is experience design. I love experience design. I think it's an underused, underappreciated skills, but we oftentimes use it only when we're focusing on customers. What about if we took our customer experience, our design experience design capabilities, and turned it internally and said, okay, for this audience, what do they need? What do they need to hear? What do they need to be empowered to do to drive the change we want to see? And it really requires us to understand more about the internal organizations, how they operate, what their goals are, and what their motivations are. And I think if we spent more time understanding what drives them and helping them to change, instead of throwing data at them and hoping they'll change, we'd do a better job.
Yep. So there's a big link, obviously, between employee experience and culture driving customer experience, isn't there?
Oh, for sure. If I go back in time when I first started to define customer experience, employee experience was always inside of my definition of customer experience. I never knew how you could look at customer experience without looking at employees. So yeah, I think it's central to if you think about, if you want to improve customer experience, that means that you have to do something different. And to do something different, that means there are going to be some employees that have to change what they're doing. So there's no way you get to improving customer experience without driving some change that requires employees to be engaged in it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And what's the best example you've seen of a company making that customer-centric transformation?
So there are a bunch that come to mind. I'll give you one.
Yeah, go for a bunch if you like. It's up to
Yeah,
you.
I'll give you a couple. We'll do. One is Delta, right? So if you go back 6, 8 years, all the airlines were terrible, right? You go on them, customer experience was horrible, and employee experience was also horrible. They all had like strikes, and everyone hated working for their airlines pretty much. So I do this thing where I go, and whenever I fly, I pretty much do this anywhere, but I do it a lot in flying, is I'll ask the flight attendants, people around it, what's it like working for ABC? I ask every airline, right? And about 5 years ago, the Delta stories changed. The flight attendants, the people at the desks, the pilots started to have a much more positive view. And at the same time, you saw Delta's experience scores start to grow. So they saw the connection between attacking both employee experience and customer experience simultaneously. You can't do one without the other. And the other example is, a Safelite Auto Glass, which for those of you who know, might know the parent, Belron is a glass repair company out of Europe that owns them. And they went on this sort of decade-long shift that started with focusing on people power, ended up being customer driven. But I think to me, those are two interesting stories where the customer experience transformation started by a focus on employees, right? So not only, like we said before, are they linked? It's almost like in many cases, you really have to start with a real emphasis on employees if you want to have a lasting driving change with customers.
Yeah, that's fascinating, because I think everyone sees the shiny new toys and they want to almost start with that, versus what you actually should do. And what you're seeing is start more with the employee side and getting that right to help drive customer change.
Yeah, I always think about if you drive change without affecting and focusing on employees, you might get temporary change, right?
Yeah.
Because employees will all go back to their old behaviors. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So if we don't figure out how we're going to move them, then we might be able to do something that lasts for a month or 2 months, but we end up going back to the old ways pretty quickly.
Yeah. I talk a bit about superficial change where, the shiny objects, everyone, it feels good and it looks like change, but it really isn't actually change, is it?
Yeah. And I think the way I think about that is the difference between compliance and commitment.
Yeah.
Right. I can get anyone in my organization to change. If I yell at them and tell them enough and threaten them enough, they'll do something differently. That's compliance. But that also means that they're not committed to it and they'll go back the old way. Getting commitment requires them to understand why, see how they fit in the bigger picture, and to explain the benefits of the new behaviors and help them get there, right? If you get commitment, it lasts much longer than compliance.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Committing to the cause and having that clear and galvanizing your employees so that they then, want to create great customer experiences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that they understand what it takes from them and you're supporting them with that change.
Yeah, awesome. So then the next little topic is KPIs. They're a really interesting topic in the CX space. What advice do you give to organizations on how to approach them?
So it's KPIs. Oftentimes the most common one is NPS, right? Yeah. That's like in the CX field. And I both love and hate the use of KPIs. If we go to NPS, right? Like NPS has done great things for the CX industry. It's aligned executives. It's created momentum. So when KPIs are used as an area to galvanize focus, they're great things. Right? They could be really valuable. When KPIs are used as the goal of the effort, they become problematic. Yeah. In other words, the goal of an organization that's focusing on customer experience is never to get a better NPS score. It might be to get a better NPS score as an indicator of some business performance that we want to improve. But oftentimes we'll lose sight of the bigger picture of what we're trying to do, because it's not about improving or tracking a metric. It's about identifying where and how we improve our business. So when that gets lost, which it oftentimes does when people overemphasize, and it's not just NPS, any metric,
Yeah.
right? You got to remember the metric is a useful tool for something else. It is not, in fact, the ultimate goal.
And when it comes to closing the insights to impact gap, what's the most important thing to get right? A lot of companies sort of struggle in that space.
Yeah, so I think that it goes back to something I talked about earlier a little bit, which is understanding from a experience design perspective, how internally people are behaving, what they want. So if we want to close the gaps, we have to understand for a particular role, like maybe a contact center supervisor or a retail manager or a product manager in a software company, what are they doing? How do they make decisions? What are the things, what's the information that they can use and how would it show up so that they can do their jobs better? And if we can do a more effective job of giving them those insights that are much more connected to the things that they do, that's the win. That's the way that we do it. Right now, what I see across the board, and this for years, which is we try to give people in the organization generic information, and we expect them to interpret it, understand it, and then also commit to changing their behaviors. And it doesn't work that way. So I think the more we can do to give people information that is immediately useful for them in the current way that they do their jobs, the more they'll use it and change their behaviors.
Yeah. So coming back to design better for employee experience, you get a better customer experience.
Exactly. You got that loop. Yeah. With that circle is a real circle.
Yeah, and then it's a clear answer. You spent 5 years at Qualtrics. What are some of the most impressive things you saw over the time, or what are some of the most impressive things that you're seeing right now, even today with some of the new features being launched?
Yeah, so I had a great 5 years at Qualtrics. Great people, a commitment to sort of driving the industry forward. I have to say, I really do enjoy the product presentations that we're seeing today. So if the people listening probably haven't been to X4, right? Haven't seen the event, but a lot of the focus on the product is now on how do the insight consumers use the data, right? The stuff we were talking about, I would say the platform historically has been consistent with the problems that we talked about in general, which is just giving data out and hoping that people change. I think the fact that the way that AI is being used and is going to be used forward to more customize and personalize the insights for a given user so that they have the information that they need that's contextually aligned with what they do is really exciting. Because I've had a vision for, and I've talked about the need for the whole field to be more focused on the user for the insights than they have.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been since we've gotten the AI out there that it actually becomes capable, platforms become capable to do it at scale. So that's the thing I'm most excited about, which is how do we personalize the insights for the different users across an organization? Yeah,
that's some amazing features out there. It'd be interesting to see where we are in like 3-5 years time. I think we'll be doing some amazing things.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah. And tell us a little bit about your new venture, Humanity at Scale. It sounds like a really interesting new venture you're embarking on.
So I'm glad you asked. So one of the things that I realized is that I think we're at a unique period in the world. I oftentimes play these games. What can I ask an audience so that everyone raises their hand or everyone doesn't raise their hand? How do I get alignment in a group? And I feel like one of the things I can do is ask your audience, ask any audience, how many people think that we can collectively do a better job of how we interact with each other and how we treat each other around the world? And I think we get pretty universal. Doesn't matter whether we agree or disagree on policies, on anything. I think we all agree that humanity can do better. And so Humanity at Scale is going to be my effort to put all the things that I've learned in the past, whether it comes to experience management or whether it comes to creating a wave and a movement of activity, to try and get leaders to understand what it is that they can do to get their organizations to better serve humanity. And by better serving humanity, it's really how do they systematically treat the people, whether it's customers, employees, the society they operate in a much more effective way so that they're improving humanity at what they do.
Yeah, really looking forward to how that progresses.
Thank you.
And yeah, it's been great to chat. Thanks so much for coming on.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
I now have Brad Anderson with me, who is President of Products, UX and Engineering at Qualtrics, fresh off the big stage. Thanks for joining me, Brad.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
No worries. Well, before we dive into the exciting new developments at Qualtrics, I wanted to get your perspective on the biggest challenges facing organizations in the experience management space.
You know, the thing that I hear from so many of the experience management leaders that I meet with is they really need to be effective at proving the business outcomes of the programs that they're advocating for. And really, to provide those kind of business outcomes, you have to be able to quantify what the benefits are. You can't just go in and say, hey, our customers or our employees are going to feel better. You have to go in and show how it's going to drive profitability and how it's going to drive revenue. Now, to really do that, what I would say the biggest challenge that organizations have is how do they drive cultural change to where, as they look at things like customer experience, it's just not a measurement, but it's something that they are actually taking action on. And the most important thing here is the rewards and recognition system of an organization that is really customer obsessed needs to take into consideration the way in which the customers are being serviced. It has to impact people's pocketbooks.
Yeah, absolutely. KPIs need to be changed, don't they? I think I've found sometimes that doesn't happen. They do the, I guess, almost superficial customer-centric change, but don't actually change the KPIs, which may have been structured around the product in silos, and they're kind of wondering why they can't operate differently.
Yeah, all too often you'll see an organization looking at something like NPS or CSAT, and they're just looking at it. Right? And those are great measurements, but they're showing you more trends. If you're really going to drive true change, like you're saying, the KPIs, the reward and the celebration system, which is the KPIs, have to include the customer experience.
Yeah, people perform how they mark, don't they? And
That's right.
Like you say, how they're celebrated. I like that.
It's just like you think about, sellers in a company, they'll go optimize for how they maximize their commission. It's the same with every human.
Yeah.
We're all working, we're trying to do a great job, and how we're recognized and how we're rewarded drives behavior.
Yeah, exactly. And if that's centered around the product, that's what they'll do. And if it's centered around the
Well
customer,
said.
then obviously that's where they'll change attention.
So this is a really interesting point. Let me kind of dwell on that for a minute. In my engineering team, what do you think the number one metric that my leaders are compensated on is?
I guess it's delivery of product. That's what you would think.
Correct. But that's put the product at the center, not the customer.
Yeah.
So the primary reward for my engineering teams is high quality customer usage.
Yeah.
If a customer is using us in high quality ways, they're getting value. The product has value. It's easy to deploy. It's easy to use. So our entire metrics, celebration, reward system centers on usage. And that puts the customer at the center.
Yeah, that's awesome because I guess a lot of tech often is just a finish line to get it produced, and it doesn't always come back, and those loops get broken. So reframing, I guess, those KPIs on how they're measured drives different outcomes, and obviously you're seeing amazing impacts.
That's right.
Yeah, cool. What are the top 3 new features on the Qualtrics platform that you're most excited about personally? Obviously, don't want to make you pick, it's like picking your favorite child, but what are you most favorite?
Yeah, so
top 3?
which team am I going to offend, when they listen to this? So it's interesting that there are a couple of things that come to mind. When I think about innovations, I think about innovations in product as well as in packaging and pricing. So I think there's things to really talk about and celebrate in all of those. And let's start with packaging and pricing. One of the things that I believe is if you're going to drive the kind of cultural change that we all want to drive, you have to democratize the use of the data. Now, historically, CX solutions like at Qualtrics, you've had to buy user licenses in order for your users to access it. In our new licensing construct, you buy one of our suites like the Customer Experience Suite, you have unlimited users. You can give the insights to every one of the employees in the company to drive real change. We've also massively simplified what you pay for. You just simply pay for the number of surveys or the number of phone calls or chats that you're going to send through our system. So it's more of a consumption-based model. But this is one of those things where, as we've rolled this out over the last 4 months, universally, customers have loved it, and at Qualtrics, we love it. So that's the first thing I'm excited about, is really simplifying our packaging and pricing. And this is where you see a lot of my background from 20 years at Microsoft coming in to really kind of try to simplify it just into these suites.
Yeah.
The second thing that I'm most excited about is what we call conversational feedback. Now, I like to joke with the team that when was the last time surveys were really radically transformed? Has it been decades? Has it been centuries? But now taking generative AI and applying it to the concept of a survey, the survey becomes a digital interview.
Yeah.
And so, for example, it's very common that researchers or the CX teams are out doing research and they ask a customer, like, hey, what could we do to improve the experience? And they get a one-word answer back. Yeah. It's not actionable. It's, you don't know what to do with it. What our AI is able to understand is, first of all, it'll identify a vague or an incomplete answer and automatically prompt the individual to give more. It then will actually adapt. And so if an individual starts talking about, well, hey, the seat wasn't comfortable, our AI in this survey, which I don't think you should even call it a survey any longer, will adapt and say, well, tell us more about why it's not comfortable. And this is all about helping organizations get better and richer data. Now, we've had this in preview, in production with a lot of customers. And what we found has been remarkable. And so here's the numbers. Like, here's the things that blew my mind the first time I saw them. When our AI engages with the respondent and asks them to give more, 40% of the time the individual engages. And we get dramatically better information. And one of the cool things about this is that additional engagement comes without any decrease in survey completions.
Yeah.
But what's been incredible is with the additional data that comes in that more detailed answer, we've been able to identify 87% more key topics in the research.
Yeah, wow.
So we're doubling the insights in the research through a survey without really an organization have to do anything aside from use these new capabilities. So that's number 2.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I guess surveys haven't been innovated for a long time, like you say, and being able to morph and properly probe almost as if it's a person is quite amazing.
Yeah, we debated, should we call it digital interview?
Yeah, well, I just thought, AI interview kind of thing. That's,
Yeah, and so I'm really excited about that. And that is the piece I think that is going to be the fastest and the most broadly used of everything that we're bringing to the market right now. The third thing I'm excited about is the concept of building these end-to-end scenarios for each of the key users that need to use our technologies. Historically, customer experience programs have kind of sat with a very small team of very bright and intelligent researchers. And so a big part of what my view has been here is if we want to democratize the data, if we want to democratize the use, you have to build purpose-built experiences for the call center managers, for every people manager, for people that are working on the front lines at a retail store or at a hospital or at a hotel. So really building out these very specific purpose-built experience with Qualtrics AI infused into it for all those different personas. I'm excited about that because for the first time, I think we can really put meaningful value into the hands of just about every employee in a company.
Yeah, so really extending beyond the insights part of the business into making it more usable. So then that really helps with that, building that data sharing culture, which, I think is massively important these days.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, cool. And what's the best example you've seen of a company turning insights into customer improvements?
Wow, there's a number of examples that come to mind. Let me think what the best one to give you are.
Well,
maybe
give
you a couple,
two
right?
If you can't pick.
Yeah, I think the thing that has been impressive to me has been when an organization really is able to personalize the experience they give, especially when there has been like a hiccup in the experience. So let me give you a very, very specific example, okay? I have a big family, okay? We have 5 children, 4 of them are married, 5 grandchildren. So when we travel, it's like I get volume discounts now on airlines, okay? But it's interesting, often we have different travel plans, but we all kind of, gather someplace. Well, we were traveling a couple of months ago, and, I have a very high status on one of the airlines because I'm always on the road. And my kids and I were all traveling, and a plane got canceled because there was some weather issues, right? I got a phone call from the call center, and they said, hey, Brad, we're going to get you booked. We're going to get you home, whatever the case may be is. My children received a text with a $15 gift card to go get some food at the airport.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of being able to personalize the experience based upon the lifetime value of what the individual is going to be going forward. Both are great experiences, but one was a very high touch white glove experience for a very profitable customer. And one was a great experience still of, hey, we're sorry about this, go have lunch on us, go have dinner on us. And so that's an example of just really personalizing that experience. And I saw that firsthand.
Yeah.
I thought that was amazing. The second example that comes to mind is I do a lot of work with a specific insurance company in the Nordics. Okay, their name is Tryg, Tryg. This is an organization that has an NPS in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
And it's an insurance company.
Yeah.
Like, if you were to say which industries would have an NPS of 90, I don't think insurance would ever come to the top of that list. But this is a company that has really put the customer centricity at the core of everything they do in their culture. The changes that they have driven in the last 5 years are simply remarkable. And so everything from the digital experience, from people who are interacting with the customers in the care center, every one of them is rewarded and recognized based upon great customer experience.
Yep.
And so to look at what they've done and the depth of how their processes work and the maturity, it's like nothing. I rarely see that level of maturity. So if I kind of like generalize back to your, one of your earlier questions, what are the biggest challenges that I see? We need to help organizations increase their maturity of their programs, just not listen but act, and their ambition.
Yeah.
We know that experiences is one of the key things that can differentiate a product or a company today. And so our CX leaders need to have big ambition to drive that kind of change.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It is sometimes a difficult. The larger the organisation gets, the harder it is to shift away from that, product-centric culture and operating model to that customer-centric ways of doing things. I think some of these more nimble companies, it's a little bit easier, and sometimes they've started there. But some of these companies have lost their way a little bit. Do you have any advice for those big companies who, if they're trying to get to be more customer-centric, how do they get there? What's the best place to?
It has to start at the top.
Yeah.
If you don't have support to drive this kind of a cultural change in your company at the very top, so the CEO, the presence, it's not going to happen. And so one of the most important things that I would advise, and as I coach CX leaders around the world, is your CEO behind this?
Yeah.
Is your CEO going to stand on stage or stand on a Zoom or a Teams call with a company and say, the most important thing that we're focused on is delivering great customer and employee experiences?
Yeah.
And if not, you need to go drive that level of commitment. And if you're one of those lucky individuals who has a leader who is completely all in on this, oh my word, leverage that, because you have got a gold mine ahead of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to closing that insights to impact gap that some organisations are struggling, what's the most important thing to get right, do you think?
Yeah, and so we talk a lot as an industry about listen, learn, and act. But the reality is most organizations are not acting. And so what do you have to do there? The first thing that I would say is it really comes down to the maturity of the programs. And then I think this is a place where AI will have a profound impact, because with AI, you're going to be able to do that act at scale. Let me give you a very, very specific example. Some of the research that Harvard just finished, where they were measuring what the lifetime value of a customer who was emotionally connected to a brand versus highly satisfied, showed that an emotionally connected customer is 52% more profitable lifetime value than someone who's highly satisfied. So here's the question. As we're moving more and more of our interactions to the digital experience, how do you drive emotional connection at scale in the digital experience? You have to use things like Qualtrics AI to do that, so that, as the individual is interacting with the digital experience, whether it's an app, whether it's a website, whether it's a chatbot, it feels human. It comes across as human. It's empathetic. Those are the things that we're working on that really enable an organization to drive that kind of action at the scale that they need to do it.
Well, it's been great to chat, Brad. Thanks for coming on and joining me.
My pleasure. Let's do it again.
I now have Stephen Issa with me, former Chief Digital Officer at the Australian Digital Health Agency. Thanks for joining me, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
Sounds like a massive job. So I'd love to hear about your CX journey there. What were some of the key milestones and achievements?
It was a massive job, a privilege to have done it. When I joined the Australian Digital Health Agency, I'd say that the capability maturity around CX was probably in its infancy. One of the first things I did was lead the establishment of what we called the CX Toolkit. So we created a customer experience toolkit that ended up winning a Good Design Award. So we've got this new kind of thought process, for lack of a better term, within the agency. We've got human-centered design, analytics, insights, all of those things that were largely net new to the agency in kind of establishing what the product and journeys looked like. So kind of at the outset, that was one of the first things that I instigated. And where it landed was something that we call the Customer Experience Center. So we started with a toolkit and landed with a center where we effectively built, think of a big room with different rooms inside it, where we would have something that looked and felt like a doctor's surgery, looked and felt like a lounge room, looked and felt like kind of a radiology clinic.
Yeah. Right.
So when we're testing our products and we're taking real people, real consumers through those spaces, and we're testing things like telehealth, I've got someone sitting in a doctor's surgery or something that felt like a doctor's surgery. Yeah. And I've got another, mum and dad sitting in what they felt like was their lounge room and testing telehealth on a TV. So we've gone from a customer experience toolkit that effectively changed kind of the culture of the organization to think differently using this toolkit and giving them guidance on how to do it. And ultimately, from a customer experience perspective, landed at this thing called a Customer Experience Center, where we not only test our products, but integration with other products in kind of real simulated environments, which we used and other agencies began to use, which was kind of a remarkable shift in kind of our trajectory in CX.
Yeah, I love that idea of making it real, because often customers test things, but it's out of context. So new environments and it's probably skews different insights and results and things like that. And if it's done in groups, then people respond differently. But making it comfortable for them, it seems like a great idea.
It was, and we had like a mum and bub walk through there, working through what we started as a digital baby book at the time, and working through that with from a surgery, from a doctor's room's perspective, and what that journey felt like, and then the next stage of that journey would be kind of you're at home and you're going through this via a telehealth consult. What does that feel like for the mum and bub sitting in the lounge room and the doctor's in their office? Serendipitous, let's call it coincidence. I don't know what you want to call it, but you think a couple of years from that time, we then get COVID and everyone's kind of working from home, and there's telehealth's the next big thing, and we're sending electronic prescriptions and all of those things. So I got lucky, right time, right place, and had the right thought process. But I think that cultural mindset, that shift to human-centered design and design thinking, and that whole CX part around starting with research and the problem statement and the journey and how does that evolve your product, made a really big difference. Some of the things that we did in COVID, we created a COVID dashboard as an example, which never existed, but you don't miss the opportunity of a crisis, and we didn't. So we created a COVID dashboard. Those things saw My Health Records, in some cases, usage and registration increased by 500% during the time. So it was a pretty special time to be part of digital health working through a pandemic. But we thankfully had set the right foundations beforehand, not knowing that a pandemic was going to begin. But it was remarkable to be a part of.
So at Qualtrics here at the X4 Summit, what are some of the new features that are exciting you?
So at that main stage presentation this morning, it was kind of mind-blowing to a degree. So I'll give you a real-life example of where I could have used what I saw this morning.
Yep.
So we were at the Australian Digital Health Agency creating the next Australian digital health strategy. So that's going to, we as the agency were stewards of the national strategy on behalf of all states and territories in the Commonwealth. So we set up kind of this feedback website and surveys where we got 11,000 responses. Now, take 11,000 responses, pump them into an Excel spreadsheet, and try to get a bunch of PhDs and health economists and others to traverse through that data and make sense of it. What I saw this morning with the Qualtrics AI and the Qualtrics Edge, which is coming, would make that kind of a one-day process rather than a one-month process, right? So you can get insights in near real time from this product. And we saw it live, and we saw the code being pushed, and it was a remarkable thing to be able to see insights being generated from vast amounts of data pretty quickly. So for me, that would have helped create a strategy faster, probably more accurate. So when you think about going through a large data set with individuals with kind of their subjective interpretation of data, it's sometimes not consistent. The outcome of kind of what they see the relevance of the data isn't consistent. But when you've got a tool like I saw this morning, I haven't used it, but it looks amazing, that could do that consistently in a short amount of time and give you direct kind of insights to link with your gut feel. That's kind of a remarkable thing that I'd be pretty excited about.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And when it comes to closing the insights to impact gap, a lot of organisations have trouble with this. And working in the government space, it's massive amount of insight and data, and how do you bring it closer to action? And sometimes it can take a while to get things done. What's the most important thing to get that right? Close the gap from insight to impact?
I'd say mindset. When I say mindset, it's about this culture of human-centered design thinking, customer experience, and starting with that and moving from kind of that to prioritization, to governance, to all of those things, but with the end in mind that it's about the customer and the customer experience. So for me, it's a cultural piece, it's a mindset piece, and you've got to build that capability within your organization. It just doesn't happen. We in the public sector, stewards of public money, stewards of public policy, all of those things. So we've got to make sure we get it right. And I'll add one more thing, is courage. So courage to make a decision on the back of the insight. Generally, you've got instinct. Combining that with the insight and having the courage to follow through to action those insights is pretty important.
Yeah. And it feels like the example you talked about before, the customer experience center, that you were talking about, making that real for particularly the senior stakeholders and leaders. Did that become a key tool in
people
helping
thought I was
build
crazy.
that culture? Really? Yeah. See, I think it makes total sense.
Yeah.
I love that idea. So it's I feel like it'd be a great tool to you get the executives in and go, these are real customers, because not many organizations have the tool or the vehicle to be able to show the execs, and often there's that disconnect, and they're sitting in the ivory tower, at a long distance away from the customers. Having that feels like it'd make a big impact on culture.
It did, and having those tangible things that you can do. So not only do we have those rooms, they were kind of modular and convertible, and you can use them as a meeting room if you needed to, and use them as a doctor's surgery if you needed to. But we also had things like a row of handsets, like Apple phones and Samsung devices and all of those things. So we built the first native mobile app for digital health. And we wanted to test that it looked and felt right, and the customer experience was delightful and all of those things. So you're sitting in this customer experience center with 10 devices, and you can all have a play with them. So having your executive walk through that, touch and feel the new product that's coming, or the new feature that's coming in that product, or kind of observing kind of a mum and a bub interacting with a product or how it would work, was remarkable to shift that mindset about kind of customer experience and where it will lead.
Yeah, awesome. Well, it's been great to chat,
Thank you.
Stephen. Thanks so much for joining me.
Pleasure.
I now have Ashley Taylor with me, a global voice of customer specialist at Flight Centre. Thanks for joining me, Ashley.
Thanks for having me here, Justin.
What have been some of the key steps in your CX journey at Flight Centre?
I guess we're slightly different in terms of our journey is quite new. We're less than 2 years into that. Our key steps really along the way is to establish where we were, what we wanted to have, what we thought best practice looked like, to acquire a partner to help us do that. And Qualtrics was the partner for us, and they've been fantastic. Then to build in a progressive way. So we started building out at first a foundational program by moving survey-driven only, trigger-based to our customers in a email to web form. And since then, we've expanded using both structured and unstructured data in a solicited and unsolicited way. We run that through a language model, which gives us, categorizes us, and applies AI enrichments. So it really helps us focus on the things that we need to look at and take action on, and does it in a way that's very actionable. Really pleased with the precision and recall of the product. And that's been our journey. It's been a whirlwind 18 months, but we're going to continue to look to how we can improve it with more probably more listening posts to set up along the way, and try to do more with AI automations and workflows so that we can get speed to action faster.
Yeah. How are you finding the unstructured part? Because that's sort of a relatively newer area that is emerging.
I love it, and that's where the gold is. I mean, the structure piece gives you your score, and that's fine. It gives you a metric that you can follow, but it doesn't tell you what it is that you need to do in order to get that metric to go in the direction that you want it to. The comments and the unstructured component is the gold itself, and it is what your customers are telling you. So to have a tool that can, we have literally, look, in the last year, I'm talking hundreds of thousands of documents and millions of sentences that we've processed. For a human to do this in any kind of, it's just not possible, and it wouldn't be objective either, and it wouldn't have the same criteria applied to it. So for the AI to go in there and break it into a sort of tree structure language model to say, here's your top level, within that these are the next series of categories, and then these are the next series of categories, i.e. it's not just service, but it's helpfulness, and it's helpfulness with problems around installing an app that really lets us know exactly what it is that we need people to focus on.
Yeah, great. And have you started to see some examples of how that's started to turn into, improvements in the customer experience space and the design teams then?
100%. So we've been live with this particular part of the component or Qualtrics product suite, if you like, only since March. Probably about 4 weeks in, we identified that we had an issue with online customers who had purchased online, giving us poor feedback about the seats that they had on the plane, that they weren't getting the seats that they wanted, be it the ones with extra leg room or the ones that are closer to the front. We passed this through to the area to have a look at. Some SMEs had a deep dive, and we found a process defect that was basically telling us if you had paid for an upgraded seat, within seat selection, if it was a seat selection which required payment for certain airlines that use certain platforms, our customers weren't actually getting that. Now, this is tens of comments per month, up to 100 comments per month that we're receiving. You extrapolate that to, this is probably actually affecting hundreds or perhaps 1,000 customers a month. By 12 months, you look at the customer lifetime value on that, and this is $1 million problem. And we had a number of comments month on month about that problem dropped by 60% this month compared to last month. So that's just sort of speed of being able to find out what the insight is, to be able to take action to it and then get the outcome is, weeks to a couple months. Whereas without the AI solution helping you, you mightn't even have picked it up, or if you did, it would require a manual analytical deep dive, which could take months.
The most amazing intern you've ever found. That's basically what AI has almost become, isn't it? It's doing those tasks that aren't possible for a human.
I mean, it's working out what it does well versus what we do well. And it can do far better than any human patterns between numbers and working out what's going there. And then it's going to go, I've got a pattern here. How about you go and have a look at it? And then we can go, oh, okay, I found out what the problem is. Let's fix it.
Moving on to Qualtrics today, what are some of the new features that you're most excited about? Obviously, AI is sort of a big driver,
but
there's so many.
Brad Anderson was just showing this morning is outrageously good. Super excited about it. I mean, this is purely conceptual 18 months ago, and there's a working demo of it now. It's the speed at which this stuff picks up and gathers momentum is just crazy. Super excited for how that looks. Love to get it and play with it in a sandbox to see how it works and what I think of the model. But again, that's using that same premise of you're using the AI to do the heavy lifting and save time so that you can do the value add stuff. And that's absolutely the thing I was salivating about. It looked fantastic.
Were there any particular features that you spotted were like, that's amazing? What was the number one that sort of sticks in your mind?
Not so much number one, but the ability to choose any particular prompt or question and have the AI interrogate that and return a response. Now, sure, that might not be exactly the correct response. I don't know. It depends how good the AI is. But it gives you an excellent starting point that it's given you in seconds. Right? And anyone that's done, like I've spent 20, 30 years in doing analytics, that's days, possibly weeks to do what it did in seconds.
Yeah.
And the time that it can save you to do that, and just work on more value add stuff is just frankly mind blowing. And the idea that you can get it to construct a specific dashboard as well for someone. And I know we're saying we don't necessarily, some of the gist was we don't need a dashboard as much because we can ask it to give us the insights. But, if you want a very specific dashboard created, that you can say, create a dashboard which shows me all these things within my brand template, done in seconds. Marvelous.
Yeah, amazing. And when it comes to closing the insights to impact gap, a lot of organizations that, particularly big ones, find it hard to close that gap. What's the most important thing to get right?
You're right. It is the hardest thing. In my humble opinion, it's about culture.
Yeah.
And it's about embedding VOC or a customer centricity into an organization that may not already think that way, and getting people to understand what that means to them and what their personal buy-in is to a group-wide NPS score, getting someone in IT to go, well, what's that got to do with me?
Yeah.
And so I think it's the process of how to do that, or how I've been trying to approach doing that, is a series of iterative comms and DMs that start out very simplistically. This is why we're doing it. Let's just plant the seed without giving too much data or too much information, and scale that up in a way that is visually easy to digest. What I find is we've got people within many organizations have an inbox full of things that they have to do, training modules, compliance modules. Here's some other numbers. Here's a set of numbers. Can you read your CEO's blog? And this is another one of those things.
Yeah.
So I need it to be easy to digest, separate itself from everything else, and create a thing that people can latch onto, so that we start to grow and embed that within the culture. And once it's embedded in the culture and people understand what it is, why we do it, and why it matters, I feel they're going to be a lot more accountable for making things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's been great to chat, Ashley.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. Love talking about this stuff. Thanks for having me and Justin. Appreciate it.
I now have Melanie Disser with me, who is Principal Advisor of CX and Voice of Customer at Ecosystem. Thanks for joining me, Melanie.
Oh, thanks for having me, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here.
From your perspective, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing organisations in the CX space?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge that usually comes up when you speak with organization is ROI, so return on investment. And I think it's a challenge for organizations because we're often very good at setting things up, programs and technology, but you can only really prove ROI if you actually drive change on the back of it. And there's no way to demonstrate ROI if we're not changing anything. And so the biggest challenges for organization when it comes to showcasing ROI is really driving action on the back of feedback. And that has become even more challenging now that we are moving into a world where the traditional voice of customer programs are very much disrupted by what we can do with new technology such as Gen AI. So traditionally, voice of customer programs rely on surveys to get customer feedback. That feedback comes in and it then sits within whatever team collects that feedback. Now that we can tap into much wider source of customer feedback with all the unsolicited data that we now can analyze through Gen AI, we can tap into contact center, social media, online reviews. So the traditional siloed setup of programs does no longer work. And so we have all this feedback coming in, and organizations often struggle to analyze it in a centralized manner and then democratize it out again and share it with the right people at the right time. And so when it comes to driving ROI or showcasing ROI, the challenge really is having a centralized program set up and then driving action on the back of that by sharing the feedback with the right people at the right time. So that's where the ROI challenge often actually comes from.
Yeah. There's a lot of pieces to connect, isn't there?
Yes.
And what's holding organisations back from closing their insights to impact gaps, sort of more specifically on, getting that working better together?
Yes. So when it comes to insights to action and how we drive action on the back of customer feedback, I always say there's three distinct ways to do that. And before we go into driving action on the back of feedback, the first challenge really is having a holistic overview of all your customer feedback. So traditionally it sits in lots of different teams. So contact center has contact center feedback, which is often only used for agent coaching, which is very important use case. But there's so much more insight that actually sits in contact center conversations. And then surveys often go to the respective teams. Social often sits in social teams. Digital feedback sits in digital teams. So the first challenge is to bring it all together, to have a holistic overview. And then when we talk about acting on feedback, there are 3 ways to do that. Most organizations only do, most of the time, only do the first thing, which is closing the loop. Closing the loop means service recovery. So when customer feedback comes in and there's something the customer is unhappy with or something they need help with that needs to be fixed, we need someone to go back to their customer, acknowledge that and say, hey, Mr. Customer, really sorry to hear. What can I do to help? That's really a frontline customer service piece, but that needs to be set up holistically and consistently across all your feedback activities. So that's the first thing. And that often happens in organizations, to be fair. The second one is operational feedback. So we have feedback coming in that's very specific for one team or one person. That person needs to receive that feedback. That's challenge number 1. But then they also need to do something with that. They need to drive action on the back of that feedback they receive. And that's a bit of a culture piece. They need to be accountable for doing that, which is a change in terms of their roles and responsibility. Traditionally, teams or people roles, we're tasked with doing something like launching a new product or launching a campaign or doing something on the website. It's not traditionally part of people's jobs to then continuously monitor and improve the customer experience. It's a bit of a culture change, but they also need to be empowered to do that, right? So It's a culture piece, and then there's also a bit of a responsibility piece. That happens at times in organizations if those people actually receive the feedback and then they're empowered to do something with it. The third piece is the one that we see least of, and that's strategic feedback. So once we have feedback coming in, I always say it's like the big ugly things that typically fall through the cracks because they're too hard to tackle. Now, in the traditional setup, that feedback comes to one particular team. That team goes, bro, I have no idea what to do with that. I don't have resources. I don't even know what the root cause problem is. Even if they know, they don't have budget or resources to actually tackle that. That needs a very different setup from an insights to action framework perspective in terms of how we collect that feedback and then how we actually move that into an initiative, a company-wide initiative, resource it, and then get it implemented. Very different setup. So they're all 3 distinct ways of acting on feedback. And the big one really is the strategic feedback is your systemic issues. You tackle those, you can really showcase ROI as well. And those are the ones that typically fall through the cracks.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 3 really great points there. And what's the best example you've seen of a company turning insights and really getting things working smoothly, turning those insights into customer improvements? What's the best company or brand you've worked with or seen?
Yeah, it's actually a tricky question because I see a lot of a lot of companies who do really well when it comes to setting up programs and implementing technologies to get us set up and started. When it comes to acting on feedback, we see a little less of that. So there's some great work going on, as I said, for closing the loop. That's typically happening. When it comes to strategic insights, that's really not happening a lot at all. And usually what we see with great success stories or examples of organizations who do things really well, it's usually one specific use case or example. It doesn't often happen at scale and consistently. So when we hear these great stories, it's typically one team who did one thing really well, but implementing that consistently. I can't really tie in organizations that I've seen or work with who does that all the time and really well consistently at scale.
Yeah, it's fair enough because it is a challenge. So many different silos. CX is almost impossible to get it all working together perfectly, isn't it? And then I guess my last question was, when it comes to closing that insights to action gap that we've talked about, what's the one thing that companies have to do to get right? What's the most important thing?
Yes. I'll be cheeky and say that 2 things.
Yeah, go for
One
it.
One is your insights to action framework. So you need to be clear around what are the actions you actually want to drive on it, on the back of feedback. And, think about those 3 examples that I gave. So you need to have a framework in place. And the second one, which ties into your insights to action framework, is the culture piece. You do need a culture of customer centricity to enable, the setup of the program and have that technology in place. Share the data. If you share the data and you have a programs set up to democratize the data, but people aren't enabled or are not buying into your customer centricity piece, you're not going to see any action. So it's your framework and then the culture piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, customer culture is so big, and that
Yes.
data sharing culture as well is massive, isn't it?
Yes.
Well, it's been great to chat, Melanie. Thanks so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
I now have Steve Bennett with me, who is Head of Growth and Strategy of Employee Experience Solutions at Qualtrics. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
No, thanks for having me, Justin. It's great to be here.
What are the biggest challenges facing organisations in the EX space at the moment?
Well, the EX space, and just to take a step back with that, employee experience is that nice deep study of how people operate within the workplace, how they can be engaged, and how they can drive productivity and performance through that. And so over the years, we've had some big significant shifts and changes, especially due to COVID, through to some financial costs and constraints and changes in that space. We've seen now that the employee experience programs have become quite significantly different to what they were in the past. And so the changes that we've seen in our in the space for employees is that they really want to be heard. And that's something that's been, I'm not saying that they haven't wanted that in the past, but now that the changes of the way the work environment is, working from home, working at work or working remotely differently, they want to be able to give their feedback on what's happening within the organization. They want to drive that. They want to understand what's going on there.
Being heard, I think, is really important. What are the two best examples you have seen of a company turning insights, employee insights, into employee improvements?
Yeah, so there's a number of different examples that you see. So first things first is HR definitely now have a seat at the table with the C-suite, and they really want to drive experiences all the way through the business and use that as a competitive edge. And so what we're seeing now is a number of customers are trying to drive and work out how they can optimize that employee experience journey, and then from there, kind of show that the business impact from it. And so if we take a step back and look at what does that mean, well, we see a number of different customers. So for instance, today here at X4, we've got Atlassian talking through how they can really drive a distributed workforce and maintain the experiences that every different employee can have, whether they're working remote or they're coming into the office for a collaborative environment, through to, say, Endeavour Group, who'll be talking about how they've gone and shaped the experience of leaders and driving that different aspect of the experience so that that can impact the employees that are out there in the field for them.
Yeah, also there's lots of different things to consider these days now,
Yeah.
isn't there? It's way more complex than it used to be.
Yes, definitely is, yeah.
And what are the top three most exciting new features on the Qualtrics platform from an EX perspective, or from your perspective? What's your most exciting things? There's a lot of AI things at the moment.
Yeah, there is certainly a kind of revolution or a complete change that we're seeing now in the employee experience program. So for a lot of people who maybe not familiar with that, the early days of employee experience was kind of paper-based format or just a single point looking at employee engagement. Now we're seeing a big shift with kind of three key areas. So the first one is around how HR utilize and understand people analytics. The second one is around our managers and how we assist them. And the third one is actually getting to the employees in their workflow. And so when it comes to the technology advances and differences from a HR perspective, there's built into the platform now the ability to do your predictive modeling, return on investments, et cetera, sitting there within the platform, the advanced analytics, which is one of the advantages of, and we haven't said it yet, about AI driving and changing the landscape out there, because you can absorb a lot more data now very quickly and understand that. The second is around our people, our managers, and our managers are great. Some of them have been accidental managers, some of them have gone and done it within purpose, but for them, we're looking at using our AI features to help enhance them. And so we have this great feature now called Qualtrics Assist to help the manager kind of make sense of their results. Kind of think about, well, how am I going to write an email to my employees about these results to drive action and go through that? And then the third part around that was around how we actually reach our employees within the field. And so there's some really great advances in how do we actually integrate more with other software technologies to actually hear them and what they're doing in the field, or listen to some of the unstructured, unsolicited feedback that's happening within that space as well.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that second one is certainly a big one, isn't it? There's
Yeah.
a lot of people thrust into that management type of
Yes.
position,
Yeah.
and having your own personal AI almost coach
Yep.
to help you through that, I think is a
Yeah.
really awesome step forward, isn't it?
I think so. It's going to really help managers. I mean, managers have a pretty difficult job.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot they've got to go through and think through. It's really important they include and think about the people experience that's happening there. And if we can give them an assistance to do that, that's going to help them kind of really kind of just not just look at the data, but how to drive the actions with the data. Because that's ultimately what employees want. They want to hear, they want to know that they're being heard, but then we're doing something with the feedback. Because if we're not doing something with the feedback, it's kind of like the old gym membership. I don't know if you've had one of those before.
Oh, yeah, I have, yeah.
Well, it's great to have it, but if you don't do anything with it, how can you expect to lose weight or build muscle?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to closing the insights to impact gap, which a lot of organizations struggle with, and EX is obviously slightly different to CX, but when it comes to closing that gap and making it work better and transition the data more smoothly, what's the most important thing to get right from the EX perspective?
Yeah, look, I think the most important thing to get right is to actually have a very clear, what are the experiences that you want to go and impact, right? So from that, what I mean is across the board, there's a transition from just measuring engagement as a metric. Now we're seeing companies wanting to move into having a holistic or balanced scorecard across all of their employee metrics, and in particular, hone in on understanding engagement, still absolutely critical. But you know what? You can have engaged people and they still leave.
Yeah.
You can have engaged people and they're not productive. So what's going on there? There's other metrics that we need to look at. So experience versus expectation, looking at people's intent to stay, looking at inclusion, and looking at well-being are clear metrics that we want to be going and reviewing. And that's why a lot of customers are using our EX25 methodology, which we've done a lot of work in the science and creating it valid and reliable in that sense. But the other part to that is, now that you've got significant rigor and science behind it, how do we then broaden that to look across all the journeys that are happening with an employee journey, right? And go and look at those moments that matter. And that's the bit where we need to go and spend a lot more energy than HR has done in the past, to go and look at things like, how does onboarding impact engagement 9 months down the track?
Yeah.
Right? How does potentially somebody coming back from maternity leave and the promotion cycle interact with maybe when they go and talk to a customer? Right? That's kind of the different aspects that you start to see now in these programs.
So obviously AI is, in every second sentence at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
What's it looking like in the context of employee experience?
Employee experience has a major contribution to help businesses adapt AI. And now what I mean by that is, when we're looking at AI, we have a lot of research out there, and quite significantly through our EX trends, what we know is that there's a lot of trust issues. Well, there's some cautious employees around adopting AI into the workplace. And so through employee experience, we can study and understand our people. And what we know is that those people who have a high engagement and high trust in the organization, they're more likely to adopt AI into the business. They also are very clear on where they'd like AI to be adopted. And that's something we can learn from our people. So for instance, let's go and adopt AI in, say, things like helping out with your managers and managers assist in that space, and helping them with their engagement and the results from that. But what they're saying is, hey, don't go and do it in performance management, right? Don't change the conversation I want to have with my manager and turn that into an AI conversation, right? That's not the space that we want around that. And so employee experience is really critical right now and in this time to help businesses understand their adoption of AI, where they want to take it, how they can go and be with that, which is really, really important. And more importantly, what we find is that if you want to start building trust around AI, one of the best spaces to do that is sitting within your employee engagement program and with your managers, and helping build it into that space there where they're being coached and being helped, because ultimately that's what will help them be more human and drive business outcomes around there.
Well, it's a nice one to finish on as well. A nice pointy piece of advice. So it's been great to chat, Steve. Thanks for joining me.
No problems. Thanks, Justin, for having me.
I hope you enjoyed that. Some amazing insights from a great collection of CX, EX, and experience management leaders. If you would like to know more about Qualtrics, check out their website, or reach out to me via LinkedIn or the Customer Smarts website, and I will put you in contact with the right people at Qualtrics. My details are in the episode description. If you found this episode insightful, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button now, as we have some great episodes coming up. And if you'd like to chat or if you have any questions, reach out to us at customersmarts.co. Catch you next time.